All right, folks. We did a lot of troubleshooting just now. We thought we would change our syntax. We like ruined our interface. We did a whole bunch of like really kind of drastic maneuvers, and then we like rebuilt the interface and reconnected everything. It still was failing. I brought up my old machine where I discovered I hadn't really quite finished that project during training. Maybe nobody did. But then I ran the teacher version and I noticed that the teacher version was pushing to a different version of iOS. And I don't know if this is going to be pertinent, so I get the fact that I do get a fair number of people that look at these things kind of generically on the internet, because the books are out there. And we were pushing to a more modern iPad, and it was like 17 point something on iOS. This is 16.4, and this code works. So all I did was basically, and I'll stop the program from running, but I just came up here and I switched to a different iPad. I didn't know which one to go to, but I just chose the 6th Gen 1. And then I made sure to also push to something similar in this, in the simulator. And down here, I think I selected just generic iPad, whatever the heck that is, right? And I didn't change anything in the code. Well, I still have, that's not true. We did try this optional approach. So I guess the proof in the pudding will be changing it back to the exclamation point, right? And seeing if that works, right? So I guess that's our next test. So this is, kind of like live debugging and troubleshooting. You can see we're trying all sorts of little fixes and stuff. So we might maybe go back to that approach, because that does kind of force it to work, which I'm not really a fan of, and I'm just dropping it there. But they want here the forced unwrap. Now we haven't even formally learned about this technique yet in terms of instruction, like in terms of lecturing and learning what that does. We've just kind of been using it, and like you can see like the spots here where we're using it. And then, you learn about it after. All right, so now I'm going to be brave again. I'm going to hit run. And if it runs, we have determined, I think pretty conclusively, that it's the version of iOS and that there's a change in either the language or something. Now, if it horribly fails, well, then we're sort of kind of back to the drawing board, and it did. Okay, so let's stop this from running and see if we can maybe backwards, engineer this a little bit, because we were putting in the exclamation point here, and then we kind of forced in a default value that I'm not really sure is a great idea. But let's see if this runs. So much for that iOS idea. But what it is doing now is it is working, right? And the apples are disappearing. So I'm kind of tempted to just kind of roll with this. And you see I exceeded my number of tries, so even the tree goes away. But at least it's not crashing. Now maybe, and I'm just kind of floating it out here, just maybe as we keep pressing forward on the code, we can come back in here and switch it to the exclamation, and maybe it'll work. And maybe this is just kind of a broken step in the instructions or something. The students that are here in the session with me are mimicking my steps, and they're having the same results. So I have a fair degree of confidence that the problem is consistent. So people watching it on the internet probably will have the same set of problems. I mean, it would stand to reason, right? All right. So with this issue aside, so the way that we solved this issue basically is we used the injection of an optional value if this is not rendering anything. Now, my concern with that is, of course, that will that print to the console correctly? Are we ever going to be capturing that value? I'm going to test this, and I think I'm going to run it again and just follow my thinking here. So as I hit the letters, really what should happen is the console should update and show us the letters, right? Like if I do like a print command, it's not crashing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a print. This just goes to the console. The users don't see this because we're doing a GUI program. And we're just going to output letter string to the console. Let me try it with a blank, because I think if I run a blank, I just get blanks on the screen, right? So there's nothing coming up on the screen, so that confirms that. Let's just put in here, I don't know, any letter. Now let's run it again, and let's see if we get X's on the screen. And we do. Okay. So what it's telling me is that this is not correctly reading the title. Right, that's what it's telling me. It's not correctly reading the title. Now, this is problematic because as we're trying to read in the stuff from the keyboard, we want it to be able to basically pull into any of the buttons that are clicked, right? And I'm just trying to get my mouse back here and be able to read in this title as text so we can process it. So this is telling me that that code is flawed. I'm tempted to just keep moving forward anyhow and see if we can kind of code around it. Like maybe the solution for this is by just coding forward. So I'm just going to proceed with that assumption. Gotta make sure my simulator is not running there. All right, let's go back then to the instruction. I'm going to get my book back up on the screen here. This has been kind of frustrating, and what, like an hour-long detour or something in order to try to figure it out, but that's okay. I do tell my students that, you know, this is kind of part of coding, is finding a problem that you don't know how to work around, and how do you, you know, adjust to that, basically. For right now, I'm going to leave this approach up on the screen. You guys can see where my mouse is, but I am tempted, very tempted to adjust as needed. And I just don't get why this isn't correctly working. You know, and I'm gonna have to do some research on it. We just don't have time to do it now. So I was on page 337 or 377, excuse me, and I'm moving on to 378. We're going to part 4. And the book is saying the following. It says, using word and guessed letters, you can now compute a version of the word that hides the missing letters. For example, if the word for the round is buccaneer from our list, the user has guessed the letters C, E, B, and J. The player should see a B, a blank, 2 C's, a couple blanks, a couple E's, and a blank, right? So it's like kind of starts filling it in. To begin with, all right, so but here's the issue with that, right? You guys saw the completed version of the app running, and if you look at this interface, right, that we're working on, and I'm going to zoom in here, right? We want to have basically the word with its blanks. This is kind of like Hangman or Wordle or something like that, right? Appear here with the correct number of letters for blanks. You know, so in other words, if it's a 5-letter word, it should be 5 blanks, right? So that's kind of what we're working on building right now. So we need to create a computed property called formatted word within the definition of the game structure. So I'm going to go back to the game struct here, and I'm going to kind of sit in this format, and I'm looking at how they're putting this. So this is a property, but it's computed. All right. And here's what they're suggesting. So it says begin with an empty string variable, loop through each character of the word. If the character is in the guessed letters, convert it to a string, then append the letter onto the variable, otherwise append a blank onto the variable. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a computed property, and I'm going to actually like do a little separation here on it, and only just pump it up to the top. But I'm going to call it formatted word. This will be in the format of a string. And we'll get our curlies in there. All right, so we'll start with a variable inside there called guessed word, right? And we'll start with a blank, empty quotes. Then we'll set up a loop. we'll say for each letter in the word, so open close curly brackets, start an if statement, and then we'll say guessed letters dot contains what are we looking for? We're looking for the letter, right? So if the letter is contained, then what are we going to do? We're going to say that the guessed word will plus equal. We're concatenating here. We're just going to use string interpolation to do it. So we'll do double quotes, backslash, parens. Inside there, we'll say letter. So we'll append that letter. And then if that doesn't happen, then we'll need an else. And here we'll say that the guessed word will plus equal underscore. So when we first put this out on the screen, we'll get nothing but underscores because nothing's been guessed. You see how that works, right? And it will be dynamic based upon the size of the word. Now we do also need to return a value here. So that will be at the very bottom. So inside this, go past the stat curly bracket there. You got to be inside the bottom one. And then we're just going to return the guessed word, which will be a combination basically of letters that are correct and letters that are incorrect with underscores, or just blank, if you will. So get that in. It says now that the formatted word property is a property that your UI can display, try using it for the text of current word label. So we're going to go back to the update UI function in the view controller here. And I'm going to widen this out here because I like my code to be as wide as possible. And we're going to add some stuff. All right, so right up here at the top, we're going to say, spell it right, go correct word label dot text. That's going to be set to the current game dot formatted word. Okay, that was the computed property. The score label text wins losses, that stays the same. The tree image view, updating the tree image based on the correct. Okay, so none of the other stuff changes. This stuff is all good. All right. So now in principle, we should be able to run this. So I'm being brave here. I do have a suspicion though, and here's the problem. Because it wasn't really reading the titles off the buttons correctly, that it's not actually going to propagate, the blanks down here. And I am correct. It is not propagating those, right? It is taking my apples away. Right. So I think what we might have to do is we might have to step back and re-engineer a little bit of this in order for it to work. So I'm thinking I'm going to stop the video here for right now to figure out if that is operating correctly. So I'm just going to hit the stop button. I'm going to hit the stop button on the video, or pause on the video, and let's see if we can figure out how to fix that. All right, so we've been working on trying to solve this for a while here, and it's been a little bit frustrating, and we're at the point where class is over. We found some good reference materials that we can refer to, and next time we get together, we're going to try to see if we can figure out what the heck's going on. I have some suspicions that it might be versions of the language that are causing the problem, but I'm going to very meticulously check all the code. I'm also going to reach out to the people that trained me to see if they can kind of explain this to me. But I think that we pretty much figured out that the titles aren't pulling off of those letters for whatever reason. And so if we can figure it out, we'll press forward next week. So I'm pretty optimistic that I'll find a solution of some sort. And if not, well, you know what, we're just going to press forward because I'm not going to spend the rest of my life on this one app. But you know what, this is how coding goes. So, the first thing to do is not get completely frustrated and give up. This is always a good tip for coders. If you hit like walls like this, sometimes the mere act of just stepping away for a while can be the solution, and then you come back and you're like, oh, there's the problem, you know. We tried adding more code to it, thinking we could code past it, and that wasn't at all the case. I also kind of am looking at this. I'm trying to get my mouse over here. Um, this little thing here, because we are dealing with a data type that maybe isn't appropriate here. Because the one video we were just watching, the guy was notating how characters aren't really a recommended or supported data type anymore, and I'm not really sure what the thinking is there. So maybe that's part of it. All right, folks, I will end the video here, and we'll get together next week and hopefully figure out what's up. But this video ends here.